We're live, my friends. Thank you very much for joining me for this live stream. You've heard myself and others, of course, make the argument that plant-based diets are highly effective for weight loss. But the truth is, it's not working for you right now, and that's why you've clicked on this video. Maybe you were losing weight in the past, but it's all of a sudden stopped. You've hit that plateau and you're not sure what to do next. Or maybe you've actually recently transitioned to eating more whole plant foods. Maybe you've made the switch to become an ethical vegan. But either way, you've transitioned to the way of this way of eating, but you've not lost a single pound, like you were perhaps led to believe. Hold on, what's going on here? Either way, it's frustrating. It's infuriating, in fact. And that's why in this live stream, I'm going to walk you through 10 of my best weight loss tips after now helping 300 plus vegans and plant-based dieters towards getting and staying slim. So that's what we're working on today, my 10 top tips to finally get control of your weight with this incredible approach to nutrition. But like we discussed before, you are stuck. You're stuck right now. That's what you're here, why you're here, You're asking for help, and help is what I'm about to give you today. So let's see how tech savvy I still am. I haven't done one of these live streams in a little while. Let's see how tech savvy I still am. Let's get the channel intro on, and then I'll be back with tip number 1. Let's do this. Step number 1 then. Lay off the vegan junk. We don't need to spend so long on this. With so many vegan alternatives and substitutions, junk food options available nowadays, certainly in the UK at least, it's very easy now to be an overweight vegan. Okay, the data looks good. The studies for vegans and vegetarians does show lower percentages of body fat, lower body weight, generally speaking, across the board. But it is becoming increasingly easier and easier to be an overweight vegan. These foods, these junk foods, the vegan burgers, the processed things, okay, it's a case by case, and every now and again you can have these. But if they make up a large part of your diet, these foods, they're going to ruin your results ultimately. They won't if you eat them once in a while, but they're going to ruin your results. They're high caloric content to minimal ratio with minimal nutrient profile means you don't really get much bang for your buck, quote unquote. You don't really get much nutrition, nourishment, satisfaction for those very, very high calories. Lots of these foods contain oil, additives, extra sugars that you don't need a whole bunch of, other quote unquote nasties, other chemicals and whatnot. These things are only doing, frankly, this plant-based message a disservice. All of these products that get released. And I remember when these started to come to the UK, I've been vegan now, coming on 8 years. This stuff started to come to the UK, best part of maybe 6 or 7 years ago. More and more, I remember the first Ben & Jerry's vegan product launching here maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And it has well, not slowly, it's rather rapidly, certainly several years ago, it might have slowed down lately. You know, you've seen more products on the shelves, not to digress too much here, but you've seen more products on the shelves. And it's only easier and easier, as I say nowadays, to just simply take all those junk foods that you used to love being a non-vegan and just replicate them with this new methodology. And like I say, I used to think this was probably an advantage overall to the vegan movement. I don't know anymore. I don't know. It is now just cannon fodder for people that don't agree with veganism or don't agree with plant-based diets. And I can't really argue with them. They're absolutely right when they criticize, the vegan movement nowadays for having so many junk food products and so many overweight vegans. This is a genuine criticism and a decent criticism. So I understand it. Anyway, we want you to lay off the vegan junk and focus predominantly on whole foods. Number 2. And this is linked nicely to number 1, which was laying off the vegan junk, because there's even some healthy, quote unquote. And I don't mean to suggest I'm about to mention a bunch of foods that aren't healthy. That's not why I'm using air quotes, but foods that are often thought of, and correctly so in many cases, of healthy, that actually are not that weight loss friendly. Now, whilst I admit that health and weight loss are often synonymous, there's an awful lot of overlap. Generally speaking, if you eat healthily, you're going to have a low body weight. But of course, then the question becomes, well, what's your criteria for healthy eating? What does that actually mean, right? Because there's a lot of disagreement about that across the nutrition spectrum. But generally speaking, there is overlap. But some healthy foods aren't actually that weight loss friendly. Think things that I've talked about before, like granola, nut butters, nuts or even seeds in their whole food form, dried fruits. These things, again, might have a wonderful nutrient profile, but they have extremely high calorie content compared to many other whole foods under the plant-based umbrella. So yeah, healthy foods, yes, health promoting foods, absolutely, that can't be argued with the four I mentioned, presuming that the granola is of a decent quality anyway. These are healthy foods, I don't mean to say otherwise, but they can be incredibly calorie dense. And you've got to watch out for this stuff if you are caring about losing weight. A lot of people in this movement will say, oh, you don't have to worry about the calories, just eat plants. But that's kind of a vague statement. Just eat plants. What do you mean? Right? There's like 6,000 plant foods out there. What do you mean just eat plants? That's a little bit vague. And what quantity? And I'm just suggesting here that you need to be mindful of these, albeit healthy foods, you need to be mindful of these higher calorie whole foods. Again, the granola, the nuts, the nut butters, seeds, so on and so forth, especially with the nut butter, right? It's like so many people come to me and they're like, Ryan, I eat 2 tablespoons of, peanut butter a day. And I'm like, that's between, it depends on your serving size. If it's tablespoons, exact tablespoons, you might be looking at 180 calories there a day that you've just lost through a couple of tablespoons of peanut butter. Like you could eat 4 apples, right, for the equivalent amount and only get 180 calories, maybe even less, the equivalent of 2 tablespoons of peanut butter. So when you put it into perspective like that and you start understanding a little bit more about caloric density, it's less about eating healthy and it's more about eating quite strategically for calories per pound or calories per gram. Does that make sense? So that's really, really crucial. Thanks for joining me, everyone just joining me here today. There might be some comments coming in. I don't know. Let's see, what have we got here? Mangoes and bananas, lol, especially the mangoes. Yeah, so I don't know what this is in reference to, maybe just what I'm talking about here with the healthy foods. I mean, again, these are healthy foods. Mangoes and bananas are weight loss friendly, but I absolutely understand your point, and you're right to raise this, because mangoes and bananas, actually for fruit, they have quite a high starch content. So they do have more calories than those more water-rich fruits, like the berries, the grapes, the apples, the pears, the citrus fruits. They're incredibly water-rich. Melon, lots of water content. So you're absolutely right to raise this. I don't think you need to be avoiding mangoes and bananas, to be absolutely clear. But yeah, mindful around these things. What else have we got here? Lady's Life says, it took me years to figure it all out after reading the books, watching all the documentaries, all the videos. I finally got this. Good for you. It does. It takes persistence. And that was the thing for me. It's a lot of people say, oh, you're so lucky to have mastered your health so young. And I'm like, well, first of all, luck, I don't know how much luck comes into it, but let's say that's true. Let's say I was lucky to master it young. Yes, I'm grateful that I have taken care of this at the age I have, but you guys don't know. Before I even went vegan, there was 4 or 5 years where I was banging my head against the proverbial wall. Like, what is going to give here? And I don't mean to sound that it was all bad before I went vegan. That's not and then being vegan automatically cured all my problems. Absolutely not, right? That's completely dogmatic. That's unfair. I was making, in phases anyway, some decent progress prior to being vegan, prior to moving in this plant-based direction. But honestly, I was banging my head against the wall and I never really found that breakthrough thing for me. And there's a lot to be said for persistence. For several years, I was trying all this different stuff, learning lessons throughout the way, and finally I could stumble across a methodology and actually have the consistency and the mindset at that point to apply that methodology, which I've been building that mindset for several years after all those failures. And then bang, it all comes together and it looks like an overnight success and I lose 25 pounds in 3 months. Well, actually, contextually, there was a lot of work before that. Does that make sense? What else have we got here? I have, but weighed myself. I have, but weighed in, or haven't. I'm assuming I haven't weighed in since January, but I feel lighter finally. Get yourself on the scales for a bit of context. I can understand why you might want to avoid the scales and just go by subjective mirror, body composition, so on and so forth. But it would be nice for you to know, a bit of it'd be nice for you to be able to quantify and validate, that you are going in the right direction. Bradley says, Ryan, do you have any advice and tips on how to deal with emotional or binge eating? Yes, I absolutely do. We're not going to cover them today because it's a can of worms, Bradley. That's not me sweeping it under the rug. Go to my channel after this and find the live stream that's all about binge eating. Find the live stream from 3 years ago. Just type in, there's a little magnifying glass search toolbar at the top right of my channel if you're looking at a desktop. Just type in binge eating there. You'll see it's over an hour long. You'll find the live stream there from a couple of years back. That's your place to start, Bradley. I'm not going to cover all of that here. What else have we got? Laney's Life, again, says people afraid of the word vegan. They certainly can be. There's a lot of stigma around it. So, yeah, they certainly can be. So where were we? So that was point number 2. Some healthy foods are not actually that weight loss friendly. Tip number 3, then, to lose weight on a vegan diet, make sure you actually eat enough. Well, hang on, Ryan. This is about weight loss. Surely you should be advising to eat less. Not necessarily. Well, yes, absolutely I should. That's one point, but that's not the point I'm making here. Also, adversely, overeating is a problem for many people. Undereating, adversely, is also a massive problem. When you focus mostly on whole foods, like I talk about in these videos, that's obviously what I recommend, there is actually a small risk that you undereat. Not in terms of nutrients, you could have an incredibly diverse and rich diet, but actually, again, in terms of calories. I don't want to keep going on about calories, but they are a really important determinant of success, as many of you understand and appreciate. I do think they are boring to go on about. I appreciate people are sick of talking about calories when they've been dieting, quote unquote, on and off for many years, but they're still an important metric. Whole foods, though, generally speaking, tend to have, I've already cited some on the previous point, like the nuts and seeds, for example, but whole foods generally across the board tend to have very low calories for their volume. So for the amount of food, the amount of bulk they provide, they tend to have quite a small amount of calories versus foods from other nutrition approaches, foods on the standard Western diet, animal products, processed foods, so on and so forth, junk foods, obviously. And whilst this might sound like a good thing, you might be thinking, hold on, Ryan, well, all of these or lots of these plant foods, they're low calorie. Surely that's a good thing for weight loss. Yes, absolutely, it's an advantage, but there are risks. Again, in the same way that you don't want to overeat, you don't want to undereat. So if you're trying to lose weight, like I did back in the day, what you want is a very moderate calorie deficit. And whether knowingly or not, a lot of people create very harsh calorie deficits for themselves because they're so eager to get down the scale as fast as possible. You know my MO now if you've been following me for a while. The clue is in natural weight loss mastery. The clue is in the name of my program, Vegan, Slim, and Sustain. We're thinking about doing this in a natural way. We're thinking about sustainability. We're thinking about longevity. We're in no crazy rush. Yes, it's nice to see that scale drop fast, but we're playing a long-term game here. We want to master this for life. So you want a moderate, gentle calorie deficit, not a really aggressive one. And when you're eating lots of whole foods, it can be easier, I would argue, to accidentally undereat versus some of the other nutrition philosophies out there. Like I say, this can sound like an advantage, but some people do come to me, and I had someone come to me very recently, and they weren't exactly sure on how many calories they'd been eating, but we totted up a couple of days of their diet prior to starting with me, roughly speaking, and we came out, this was a young lady, we came out fairly active. We came out at around 900 to 1100 calories. That was about the range she was hitting. And she'd been doing so for a year and not losing weight anymore. So such a harsh calorie deficit, but not losing weight anymore. And we had to discuss for the first time, it was the first time that she had heard about principles such as adaptive thermogenesis, metabolic adaptation, understanding metabolic efficiency, and we're doing a little bit of reverse dieting quite successfully with said client. Now, of course, this is a minority of people, but it is very possible to accidentally, without knowing it, like this client, undereat for a long period of time without you even realizing it when you eat so many whole foods. So beware of this. Tip number 4 here, get at least 7 to 8 hours sleep. I think I don't perhaps pay enough credit to sleep. Being sleep deprived, lots of problems. It creates emotional instability, chemical imbalances in the brain, including hormones being one of those chemicals. Hormones not functioning as they should equals bad mood, low energy, poor focus, so on and so forth. And of course, none of these things, I don't have to tell you, you know when you've had a night sleep deprived, you know how the cravings come on. None of these things help you make good choices, right? The bad mood, the low energy, the poor focus. These things aren't advantageous to make good, healthy food choices throughout the day, and exercise habits, are they? Of course not. Fix it, folks. Fix it, quite straightforward. Things in the past that have helped me, I'm not perfect with my sleep. I'm certainly not a sleep expert. I'm on no high ground to talk about sleep or give advice here. It's probably the area of my health that if I was to give some self-critique, I don't think it's terrible, but it's not quite up to par with my nutrition, with my exercise habits, so on and so forth. So I could do a bit better with it. But the things that have helped me through experience with the past, blackout blinds, actually having a very, very dark room, screens off past a certain time, which admittedly I'm very bad at, but the periods of my life where I've been very forceful, very conscientious, turning my screens off past a certain hour, that can really help. You'll thank me later for this stuff, folks. Get that sleep in, helps you make much, much sounder food choices, especially exercise as well, but food choices especially, I find. How are we doing with comments and questions, folks? Let's see here. In your opinion, should a breakfast be a higher calorie meal or lower, say compared to lunch or dinner? This is simply down to preference, but you are asking my opinion. So for me, I know a lot of intermittent fasters will go, well, it's cliche, breakfast, the most important meal of the day. Edward Bernays invented breakfast 70 years ago. That is something 80 years ago. That is something I've talked about. There was a bit of a PR job done on breakfast historically, and it has become a bigger deal in recent years. So as much as I agree with what I've just said, I do actually argue that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, right? I do. All things considered, I do think breakfast is, for me, the most important meal of the day. Is that to say your most important meal of the day needs to be the highest calorie one? Not necessarily. It really is down to preference. It's down to schedule. Think of it like this. When do you expend most of your calories, right? This is a principle called calorie distribution. And I quite like the idea of matching your calorie intake. This is one of the reasons, one of several reasons why I'm not an intermittent faster. I do it every now and again, accidentally, but I'm not practicing intermittent faster. Or one that does it via the mornings anyway, fast in the mornings anyway. I've lost my train of thought, folks. Sorry, stay with me. What was I just talking about? Intermittent fasting. I've done it a couple of times throughout the years. What was I saying? Oh yeah, well, I don't know exactly, but for me, it makes sense to match up your calorie intake to your calorie expenditure. So when are you the most productive, both physically and cognitively? When do you do the most things? Can you line that up quite nicely with your fueling? That's what I would say. So I think for you, it's definitely preference. Really what matters is at the end of every day, you've consumed an appropriate amount of each macronutrient, an appropriate amount of calories for your goals and your activity levels. An appropriate amount of fiber and micronutrients, vitamins and minerals. That's what matters, not really necessarily the distribution throughout the day. But if you want to be optimal, which perhaps is overrated and probably overly engineered and scientific to be practical, to be honest, to always be perfectly optimal. That's not really feasible all the time. You're not going to be textbook and Puritan all the time. But if you want to be optimal, I suppose, I would suggest lining up your calorie intake with your calorie expenditure. If you have very busy and active mornings, maybe you do your exercise in the mornings, it makes sense that breakfast and lunch should perhaps be more calorific than dinner when maybe you're settling down for the evening. Does that make sense? Got another question here from Christopher. Your program. Oh, Chris, yes, of course, Chris. Hi, how are you? Best way to work out daily calorie requirements. Yeah, I would use, is it Omni Calculator? There's a couple online. They're not amazing, Chris, frankly, because they're all built for norms and generalisms. But yeah, I would use for you especially, Chris, because you're extremely active, unless that's changed, you want to use the Harris-Benedict equation to work out calorie intake with exercise factored in. So just give a Google, Chris, to Harris-Benedict equation, calorie calculator, those exact words. You'll find some decent ones. For reference, the one that I've been using sometimes recently when considering needs of my clients, I think it's called Omni Calculator, if you want to use that specific one. And it's half decent. It's not bad as they go. That should help you out. Okay, on to our next tip. I think we're now on, what are we? Are we on tip number 5? Yes, we're on. We're on tip number 5. Remember that you're not all that special. How rude of me. It sounds funny, but sometimes we like to believe we're more unique than we actually are. We've all done this, haven't we? So when it comes to weight loss, why isn't this working for me? Or maybe just the veganism angle. Oh, why isn't this plant-based diet stuff? Why isn't it working for me? Or I couldn't stay vegan because my body didn't like it. You might well be struggling. You might well be doing something wrong, unknowingly, knowingly. But generally, there is a time-tested, proven formula for success. There are templates that I put out there, that other fantastic teachers put out there, the doctors and folks put out there. A balanced plant-based diet which prioritizes whole foods, you're supplementing things like B12, omega-3, vitamin D, just as an insurance policy. You're moving your body a bit, you're hydrating well, you're getting enough sleep, stress management, so on and so forth. Sometimes it's easy to say it didn't work for me, right? But there's a proven formula there. And I just feel like a lot of the times that someone says, I'm struggling, why isn't this working for me? I often feel that it's a bit of a cop-out, a bit of an excuse to stop trying. Now, there might be something wrong, right? And I don't want to sound really dismissive or disregarding of people that are struggling with this way of eating. Or maybe they're doing well with this way of eating and they feel good, but they're not losing weight. I don't want to be dismissive. There are people's bodies that are stubborn out there, or they have medical conditions, hormonal problems, that make some of the processes, losing weight, getting healthy, make it more challenging, let's say, compared to the average person. This could be argued, right? I work with some of these people that seem to be very stubborn. Not in necessarily disposition, but in terms of their body responding to what we're working on. This happens. There are people out there for whom metabolically, hormonally, genetically, weight loss is hard. For one reason or another, transitioning to this approach to eating might be more challenging. So I don't want to sound really disregarding of those folks, but a lot of people will say, it's just not working out for me, as a reason to stop. because they're done, because they're tired. They're tired of the strictness or the perception of strictness, the intentionality, the struggle, the constant fight, the negotiation that you have to do in your mind to try and make healthy food choices every day. It can be easier to just quit and say, you know what? I don't need all these rules right now. It's too much. Just let my mind be free. Give me freedom. Let me eat whatever I want and be done with it. Forget the health goals. Honestly, ask yourself, did you really do everything right? Before you give up on weight loss, before you give up on a plant-based diet, did you actually give it a fair shot? Were you actually consistent enough with it to where you could actually judge it? There are formulas and templates out there for your success. And if you've hand on heart followed them and you are struggling, fair enough, that's different. But I think a lot of people are ready to jump to conclusions, to make the argument to themselves that they are the odd one out, that they're special, that they're unique, so they have a reason to go to bed at night and not feel guilty for screwing up the stuff that they really wanted to do and they still in their gut really want to do. Bit harsh sounding. Step number 6 here, be totally intolerant, another mindset one, of your excuse making. Be totally intolerant, sounds funny, of your excuse making. As I said on the previous point as well, it's an extension to it. We give ourselves a free pass so easily sometimes. It's okay. I'll start again tomorrow. Or I deserve this treat right now. It's been a tough day. Let me have my ice cream in peace, right? Or you make one bad choice, like I said with the previous example. Oh, forget it. Today's a write-off. I'll start again tomorrow. Frankly, if you want growth, this is unacceptable. And you have to view it as such. You have to view it as unacceptable. And you want growth, you want weight loss. That's why you're here. That's why you're watching this video. And continuing to indulge the same justifications, the same excuses, the same rationalizations for going off track, the same justifications of your poor behavior, it's not going to allow you to grow. It's not going to allow you to actually internally change, fully embrace this way of eating and stay consistent with it long enough to see lifelong changes and lasting results. So you have to raise those standards and become intolerant of your own BS. And I always say, my client's probably sick of hearing this from me, weight loss, certainly for me at least, was a lesson in self-awareness. I don't know nothing. I'm a little squirt. I'm not even 30 years old yet. I don't know nothing. But from the process of losing weight all those years ago, I learned an awful lot about myself. It was a real education into how my mind works, the things I'm pretty decent at, the things I'm not so decent at, the stories and limiting beliefs I have, the insecurities I have. Losing weight, it brought a lot of those things to the surface, and I know many of my clients will attest to this through their own personal experience as well. And yeah, you get quite good at spotting your own BS, your own excuse making, when before, there's a saying, right? Ignorance is bliss. If you're never challenging yourself, if you're not, forcing yourself to be more mindful about the thoughts you're having, about your food choices, if you're not giving yourself rules again and boundaries for your behavior, there's nothing your brain is going to do to keep yourself in check. You're not going to have feelings of guilt. You're not going to learn from mistakes because you're just giving yourself that free pass all the time. And weight loss creates great self-awareness, and you'll get better at calling yourself out on your own BS. So if you're listening to me and going, that makes sense, Ryan, I'm trying to be more intolerant of my BS, I'm trying to raise my standards, get more serious with myself, and stop those little sayings and those little mantras like, oh, today's a write-off, I'll start again tomorrow. I'm trying to do that stuff, but it's really hard. Just know the more you keep doing this, the more you stick at it, the more awareness, generally speaking, you will develop. You're going to be able to spot some of these little things when they pop into your head at the time rather than later down the line. Step number 7 here, remember carbs actually help. That's right, they actually help you lose weight. And of course, I'm not talking about those junk carb sources like soda and candy, but I'm talking about nutrient-rich whole food sources like our whole grains, our beans, our fruits and veggies. So don't lump all carbs into one category. Carbohydrates are not a food group. In the same way that proteins are not a food group, fats are not a food group. Yet people use those words all the time to define food groups. Instead, carbohydrates, fats and proteins as well by extension, but carbohydrates that's a term that defines a macronutrient group, not a food group. A macronutrient group with protein and fat being the other of the big 3 macronutrients. So remember this, keep this in mind. Don't lump them all into one category. Many foods are high in carbohydrate, but still fantastic for you, fantastic for weight loss. The simple view that carbs are bad or carbs cause weight gain, what a binary view that is. That is a simple view, and it neglects calorie density, it neglects fiber content, whether sugar is natural or added. For more on this, we don't need to explain too much because I've covered this goodness knows how many times. But for more on this, you can check out the video that I did maybe the best part of a month or two ago, where I dispel some of the common myths around carbohydrates, and I'll link that in the description box down below. How are we doing, folks, with the comments? Oh my goodness, we've got loads coming in here. Chris, you're very welcome. I think that was your question about calorie requirements. Hope that helps. And great to hear that you're 50 pounds down. Good for you, mate. Let's see. What does Louise say here? Hey, Louise, do you think a diet fewer than 1,400 calories is much too low for a female 5'2", currently 115 lives, most of the 15 pounds? Most of the vegan community on YouTube considers this starvation, recommending 2,000, 2,500 for most women. Louise, this is really hard. I don't know a damn thing about you. I don't know a damn thing about you. What I do know is we are utterly obsessed in the vegan plant-based space with this idea of eating as much as possible. And I suppose that's not a terrible thing. I think you want to eat as much clean, healthy, whole food as possible. You want to eat as many calories as possible and still maintain a decent body weight and still, perform well physically. So, it's not a bad thing to be very wary about the pitfalls of starvation. But a healthy, low-calorie diet is not automatically starvation. The question is, Louise, I don't really know a lot about you. You've given me some decent context, to be honest, but I don't know about activity levels, so on and so forth. I'll be happy to have a conversation with you privately, Louise. I've got a couple of questions I want to ask you, certainly about the activity levels. Also be helpful to know what your goals are, and then maybe I can give a more personalized calorie target for you that if I were you, I might aim for. So we could do it like that if you want, if you drop me a message on Instagram. What else have we got here? But yeah, I mean, it's worth saying here, just so I don't seem like a fence sitter, 1,400 for many people is going to be far too little. But let's see. Bradley, what do you think of water fasting, not intermittent, for a day or more as part of whole foods plant-based diet? For a day or more, no, I don't recommend water fasting. I think you're playing with fire there. I think, 24, 36, 48 hours, that could have some amazing benefits, but I'm very wary of recommending water fasting for people that goes beyond some of the aforementioned times. So I think it has merit, Bradley, but I wouldn't get lost in that world, that's for sure. You need something you can sustain, right? So just eat well in the first place. And every now and again, if you want to do a brief fast from food, 24 hours or so, do that. I do that every couple of months. If we have set a daily caloric goal and we've been very consistent and not struggling with it, how often is it okay to go a couple of 100 calories over? Just every now and again. You don't want to get used to doing that. Just every now and again. Don't make it too often. You are like, I don't know what that means, Jackson. What are some foods that can help you stay full and remain in a deficit? Potatoes. I feel I don't get enough protein and I tend to want to overeat. Well, tofu is really good for this. Tofu, tempeh less so because of you're talking about remaining in a calorie deficit, but tempeh, you can still eat lots of tempeh and be in a calorie deficit. Tofu and seitan, very, very good. Low calories to high protein ratio, especially seitan. So they might help you. But aside from that, Jackson, lots of potatoes in the old diet. Bradley says, thanks, mate. Makes more sense. You're very welcome. So on to our next tip. Where are we? I've lost my notes. Where are we? So we've done number 7, which was carbs actually help you lose weight. As an extension to this, number 8, fruit does not automatically cause weight gain. The exception being if you only ate medjool dates all day. I mentioned dried fruits in point number 1, didn't I think, or point number 2. Yeah, you might struggle to lose weight because I think the average medjool date, like 65 maybe calories. So if you only eat medjool dates, yeah, you might struggle. But fresh fruit is one of the best food groups for weight loss out there because of its high water content and subsequently, of course, therefore, low calorie density. It's not impossible, but it's extremely hard to overeat on fresh fruit. The same extends to vegetables, by the way, but there is a certain caution around fruit because of the sugars. But I would remind you that you're natural, and I've gone over on Instagram and YouTube a million times the difference between sugars in fruit and sugars in, fizzy drinks, carbonated drinks, so on and so forth. Very, very different. Tip number 9 for weight loss on a vegan diet. Know that it gets easier. This is a crucial one. Yes, it's tough at first, the transition. But once things become habitual, it feels a lot more natural. Consistency itself also brings some momentum, feelings of self-belief, discipline, a shift in values and identity. It's amazing. When my clients stay consistent, it's amazing how quickly taste buds change, beliefs change, thoughts and feelings towards foods change, without actually that much internal quote-unquote work. Yes, the mental and emotional aspect is a huge focus of my program anyway, so I'm giving my clients mentorship and coaching on the mindset stuff too, of course. That is definitely something that's underemphasized across the diet spectrum, so I'm happy to give an awful lot of focus on my program to the mindset part of things. But generally speaking, just eating well consistently, automatically, is going to heal a lot of the relationship with food problems people have, bad habits, so on and so forth around foods. So you need to do the internal work too, of course, but consistency itself is a fantastic antidote to many of the things I've already mentioned. And once you've been doing this a little while, you know, at first it feels very forced, doesn't it, right? You want the burger still. You want, I know these are cliche examples, you want the glass of wine on a Friday night, right? You want the beers with your friends watching the sports games. You want those things, the cookies after dinner, the cake, whatever, ice cream, so on and so forth. And so eating healthy at first feels very forced. You feel like you're doing something against your norm, against your quote-unquote default setting, against many of the habits and food preferences that you've built and trained and programmed into your brain for years, and in many cases, decades. So it feels really incongruent. It doesn't feel like you. It doesn't feel right. It feels very forced. It feels very alien. But obviously, the more you do this, the more those scales, hypothetically, the figurative scales get tipped, and the more time you spend eating well and prioritizing eating well. Yeah, okay, there's years and decades on the back end that you haven't maybe done that, but over time, those scales will begin to tip, and it will become your new normal, your new default setting to eat well. And that's when it gets easier, folks. When it doesn't feel like this big internal negotiation or tug of war in your mind every day where it's like, oh, I know what I should eat, but I really want X, Y, Z, or I really want to go out to eat, or screw cooking tonight. I've had a tough day. I deserve to go out to eat. We talked briefly about that reward dynamic, that deserving, I deserve a treat sort of mantra or rationale earlier on. So yeah, but it does get easier. Those things disappear in time the more consistent you are, and things will eventually feel congruent with who you are rather than like very forced behavior. Does that make sense? And finally here, of course, step number 10. If you've got any final questions, folks, stick them in the box. I've got to disappear soon. I'm going to play some tennis this evening, which I'm really looking forward to. It's been a couple of days. So stick some questions in. Maybe I can find 2 or 3 minutes after point number 10. But tip number 10 here, stop punching above your weight in terms of exercise. I had to get an exercise one here. We've largely been talking about the food so far. I think this one is fairly obvious, but it's seemingly easy to be ignorant when you're when you're desperate to get fast results. When people want to fly down the scales quickly because they want to get in that wedding dress, or they want to lose some radical amount of weight for the vacation they've got in 3 weeks' time, and I'm like, it's 3 weeks' time. You've already started too late. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're thinking about how to lose weight, but it's in 3 weeks' time. You're already way too late to lose 20 pounds or something absurd like that. When people are in a rush, they start doing really extreme things with exercise that, you know, just the question of sustainability has gone out the window. Signing themselves up to boot camp classes at the gym, spinning classes. I've got no problem with high intensity cardio or high intensity HIIT workouts. I've got no problem with those things. You know, those martial arts classes, the tennis is very relaxed, but you guys that follow me closely, the Muay Thai, the martial arts stuff that I do, and with the sparring, those sessions, you know, I have to sit, as soon as the last bell goes on the end of our sparring rounds, I'm slumping to the floor. I'm that tired. I'm dripping, right? And they make you super fit, but I am done at the end, right? Cream crackered, as they say. I'm done. But this is something that I've been working towards for years, right? And I have a fitness level now to whereby those workouts are appropriate for me to do multiple times per week, 2 at least maybe 3 times per week. That's very appropriate for me. I know how to rest between them. I know how to fuel accordingly for and between those more high intensity workouts. Not to sound patronizing, many of you don't yet. So start gently, build up your fitness in time, lose weight, get all that pressure off the joints, lower the risk of injury before you do those more intense stuff. Wait till you're in a plateau before doing more intense stuff, right? There is no rush to master all your exercise and to become an athlete right away, especially if you've got a lot of weight to lose. You'll risk injury. burnout, quitting early because it's hard to sustain, paying a fortune in Orange Theory or gym memberships and whatnot. So just start out with gentle, low intensity activities, and graduate up to the more intense stuff as your fitness ability improves. As you're slowing progress on the scale seems to suggest that maybe you could do something more intense to speed things up, to up the ante. And yeah, I think you'll save yourself a lot of problems over the medium to long term. It can feel great to go from doing no exercise to 3 spinning classes a week. I get it. Like, that's brilliant. And it's brilliant that you've got that ambition and commitment. But please ask yourself, is this realistic? Am I likely to sustain this? Are there any negative consequences of me doing this? Maybe I should just start with 1 spinning class a week and a little bit of walking. A couple of weeks' time, maybe I'll try a 2nd spinning class. Build yourself up in time, baby steps. I know it sounds like I'm being condescending to you guys. Do what you want at the end of the day. You're not my clients. You can do what you want, but that would be my recommendation. Baby step your way up there, incremental progress with the exercise. You don't have to do this with food. You can start eating healthy tomorrow, and you should start eating healthily tomorrow. But with the exercise, it requires a little bit more respect and humility to where you're actually at. Otherwise, you're going to get injured and hurt yourself or do something very unsustainable. Okay, have we got some questions? That's it, though. Those are my 10 tips. Let me know which of these resonate down below. Louise says, thanks, I'll drop me a message. That was about the calorie stuff. Yeah. What's your opinion on cooking with alcohol? I don't drink, but yeah, I mean, again, as long as it's vegan, a little bit, it's not gonna ruin your results. I just want to make it a daily habit, and I would make sure it's just literally a splash going in there is what I would say. But of course, as someone in the health domain, I can't sit here and say that alcohol is good for you and that you should do that. It's obviously not. It's terrible for you, alcohol. And so that obviously has to be my stance. I think I also can't in good conscience sit here and say that I never drink alcohol, because as I've said many times, I do occasionally enjoy a nice G&T. So that would be hugely a great double standard of me if I was sat here saying, I don't have, or you should never, ever, ever have alcohol. And the only way to get good results is to never have alcohol, because that's not my story. That's not my reality. But there are many periods of my adult life where I've gone 6 months to a year without drinking alcohol. I've done that numerous times over the last 10 years or so. Alcohol is obviously not good for you. Right, that's it. My 10 tips. Thank you very much to those that join me live. Thank you to those watching me, watching the replay. If you found this live stream useful, but you're sick and tired of trying to figure this stuff out by yourself, I can personally show you how to lose your first 15 to 25 pounds in the next 12 weeks with simple plant-based meals. And I emphasize simple plant-based meals, nothing complex, and gentle exercise only, no HIIT workouts. You can learn more about my vegan, slim and sustain program at ryanadamscoaching.com. Once more, that's ryanadamscoaching.com, or you'll also find the link down below. Thank you very much, folks. Thanks for joining me here today if you've been live, and see you soon. Thanks.